All right, let's take a look at our project here. We've got 100 names. These are employees of our fictional company, and it's just first and last all the way down. Our job is to give each one an ID number and an email address. Each one of those has a few challenges that make it a little bit harder than it sounds. So for example, the email, you got to make sure it's all lowercase. You got to make sure it's all plain, legal characters, no accent marks, no apostrophes, things like that. And most of all, you got to make sure it's unique. If I have a John Smith and a James Smith, I can't give one guy J Smith at company.com and then give the next one J Smith. I have to make some extra character or some extra number or something on one of them to make them unique. Same thing with the ID number. It should be unique, but at least it's whatever you want. We could base the ID number on the order you get them, or the alphabetical order, or just make them completely random as long as they are different. And then we're going to write them to a file. And instead of writing on this file, which could work, like we could just add to each line, but we might make a mistake, we might get interrupted halfway through, we might have an error that ends up deleting some of the names, or maybe we accidentally turn them lowercase when we're doing the email thing. I'm going to make a new file and write everything to the new file. That way, this one is always there. If I need to go back and see what raw data I started with, I'm not going to mess it up. And that's true in general. Python is always happy to let you make a new string, a new list, a new file, a new thing, instead of messing with the one you have. So today, I'm going to start this. We probably won't finish because this involves a lot of skills we haven't seen yet. We'll just build up each little bit along the way, and we'll probably notice a few things that I didn't mention that we'll need as well. So I'm going to say with open people.txt, that's the name of the file, as f. This is what we talked about last time. With is a context manager. It says anything that's indented under here is going to be handled in terms of errors, in terms of closing after we're done. It saves us the work. And then I could say people equals f.read. That's what we did last time when we wanted the whole file in one big blob. And it appears to be nice if I print it, but it's really not, because this is one string. This is one string, the whole thing, and after every line it has this thing, the new line character. So when they print it, it appears pretty that they're all separate, but they're not. It's one string of like 1,300, 1,400 characters, which we don't like, because I want to get each name one at a time, right? So, for example, if I print the len of people to get the length of this thing, it's going to be something huge. Yeah, almost 1,400 characters, because it's all just one big blob, and I don't want that. So I could split on the new line, but Python already has a method to do that, which is if you say read lines, instead of just read, it'll give you one line at a time. So now if I print the len of people, it's going to say 100, because it's going to be 100 separate chunks instead of 1,400 blobbed characters. Okay, and now when I print this, it's going to initially look worse, but that's just because the print function isn't cheating it for us now. It's actually showing us what's in there. So each name is separate, and they're in a list, which is great. We love lists. They're easy to work with. And our only issue is we have this new line at the end of each one. So let's take that off. There's a method that we've used in the past and we're going to continue to use forever called strip, which is whenever you get data from a spreadsheet or whatever, it might have a space at the beginning, might have a tab, might have a new line, it might have these invisible characters at the beginning or end that we don't like. So I'm going to say l.strip for L in read lines. L just is my way of saying line. I would give it a good descriptive long name if I was going to ever use it again, but I'm only using it right here, and then it never shows up again. So l.strip means strip the line, take off any spaces that were on the ends or new lines that were on the end or tab that was on the end, and just give me the good stuff. So now if I try it, I'll see slightly prettier version. This is exactly what I did, by the way, with the advent of code. On those advent of code problems, they give you a list of poker hands or a list of map coordinates or whatever, and you do this exact thing to get them ready for processing. And by the way, I don't really like the name people. I probably should have said something else, because when I use people later, I'm going to talk about like the whole account, like the whole object that has a name and ID and whatever. So I'm just going to call this names. I think that's a better, I think that's a better way of saying it, because the person is going to have a name and an ID and a name and salary and whatever we add later. So let's do the simple step first, which is to split them one more time and get first and last, because I'm going to use the first and last on our emails to say it's like J Smith or whatever, and I'll probably use them for other things too in the future. If you send out automated emails to your employees, you're probably going to say, hey Sarah, comma, here's your stuff, and the computer would need to have the first name in order to do that. So let's make a little loop. First comma last equals name.split. Split with some parameter will split on a character, like you could split on commas or whatever, but the default is to split on a space. So it'll split like, hey, everything before the space and everything after. So if I do this and then print first, just as an example, it will give me the first name of all the people, which is what we're going to use as part of our thing. Now I'm going to do the email, and I think the email is going to be hard later when we change some of the characters, filter out some of the characters, whatever. But the base version, where you just take initial last, shouldn't be that crazy. However, when I've got this situation, when I've got like, okay, something that I know it's going to do a single job, even though that single job is going to have more and more parts, I don't want to go into my main function or my main loop and keep growing it. I want to put this in its own little function. So let's say generate email, and it'll take a name. I'm going to specifically call it full name inside of here, just so we know for sure that we're saying this is a string all at once. Maybe later we'll change it to first and last separately, but it's going to be the place where we do that. And so I'm going to say email generate email name. Okay, and then we'll print the email. Obviously that's not ready yet, but now let's get some going. Let's say first, to get the first character, we say 0, index 0 is like the first thing, plus last plus at company.com. Let's return that, because that's the general idea, right? Like we get the initial, we get the whole thing, we get the what do you call it? The domain. All right, so we got something. It's starting to work. It looks kind of like an email, but we have several problems. One, we have capital letters. You probably don't want those. I know it works, like if you send an email with capital letters, it usually works, but let's standardize. Another thing is we have some accent marks and hyphens and apostrophes that we don't want. And another thing, I'm not sure if we see right now, but there are some duplicates. Actually, I do see there's an S Baker and there's another S Baker. So we gotta, let's add some to-do comments. Let's say to-do, remove hyphen apostrophes, to-do, replace accented characters. And I'm doing those separately because if it's a hyphen or an apostrophe, if somebody's name is like O'Brien, we can just cut that character out. We don't mind. But if it's an accented character, we don't want to cut it out. We want to like make a new version of it that's like the E without the accent or something, which is slightly different. And then to do check for duplicates. So those are all things to complicate it. It's going to be more work. I'm not going to finish it all right now, but this is good to mark it down so we don't forget. However, the lowercase thing is pretty easy. We could just go dot lower, like I guess you put parentheses. We just do the whole thing dot lower, and hey, that solved that problem. It doesn't solve every problem. That's why we have our to-do comments. So we'll come back to this later. And now it's separate, right? Like our main loop here. Oh, I just noticed a mistake. Our main loop here doesn't have to know how we get the email. It just says, hey, there's a function, it gets the email. I'm going to trust it. And then if we change how it works later, maybe they use a full name, like John Smith. Maybe they put a dot. Maybe it's like John Smith at company. Like some places do that. Then this part of the code doesn't care. It just says, hey, email guy, do your email job and give me the answer. In fact, it might even be in a separate file or something. However, I did notice a problem. I did make a huge error here that would come back to bite us later, which is that I called this parameter full name, but then I use name in here. I called it full name because I wanted to stress that, like, okay, when you see name, you don't know is it 1 or 2 or whatever. And this is using name, which shouldn't work, but it does because we don't have this wrapped up in a function. Let's do this. And now if I try to run it, it's going to say, hey, what is name? We've never heard of name, which is good. Like, I should have got that error last time. You want to have errors because it makes the stealth problems less stealth. So what I should have said is full name. Okay. So it was using that variable that was leaking out, and it just happened to kind of work this time, but in the future it wouldn't have, and we don't like that. So I probably wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't making a video, and I would have had to have a problem later with debugging when something went wrong. Okay. So then we'll give them an ID number as well. I can't say ID, or I can, but it would be a bad idea because ID already means something in Python. You see how it turns blue? Just like if I say, you know, break or something, it's a keyword, it's a meaningful reserved word. So I don't want to use ID even though it does make sense. So let's just say like ID number, which is kind of ugly. Maybe I'll think of a better one. equals generate ID. Should it get the name? Are we going to use the name when we generate ID? I don't know, maybe not. So generate ID. We could get the name and it could like use that as some kind of seed for the function. We'll determine how it works later. Okay, so to do generate unique 6-digit ID. But for now, as a test, let's just return 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then for each of these, let's print name, email, ID number, just as a test to see if we're on the right track. Hey, look at that. This is kind of what we're going to see in our final version, where it's a table. I know it's not organized. We could maybe tab it over to make it look good. But it's going to have the name and the email and the ID. We could put the ID first because sometimes that's how you look things up. Or if we could put the last name first. And each one has these things. So each one has a first and last and an email and an ID, even though the IDs are all the same and the emails are not quite ready. This is the general pattern we're going to do in the next few days as we learn how to do the email better, as we learn how to do the ID, and then finally as we learn how to write this stuff to a new file. So the new file is going to look kind of like this, but better, and it's saved for the future. I'll end this now, and then we'll add more in the next step.